Hello, this is Movie Minute Recaps. I'll be discussing the science fiction thriller film Z for Zachariah today. Warning: this contains spoilers. Be cautious and mindful. Scenes of a barren metropolis that has been totally destroyed by radiation are seen at the start of the film. The population has been nearly wiped off, and those that remain are having difficulty making ends meet. And Burden, a young lady, is our protagonist, and she is first introduced to us in the following scene. She puts on a protective costume and heads into the city as part of her daily ritual to get supplies. She heads back to her farmhouse, which is situated in a verdant valley encircled by mountains and forests, after gathering the necessities. It turns out that radiation is not affecting this area, so things are pretty much as they are here, and takes off her suit as soon as she gets there, and gives herself a good wash to get rid of any remaining radiation. She then uses the items she scavenged to make dinner, eats it, and goes to bed, and goes out the next day with her dog to inspect the trap she set. She follows the dog when it suddenly runs off after sensing something. They soon come across a peculiar-looking car with a man named John Loomis inside who is dressed in protective gear, and is curious, so she ducks behind some distance and watches John to see if he's seeing anything dangerous. Happy to take off the suit, his tracing equipment indicates that there is no radiation in the vicinity. With a long, relieved breath, he then jumps into a nearby waterfall. When it notices this, she runs to him in a panic and orders him to get out of the water. John is startled by her unexpected appearance and points his revolver at her, and, though, makes it apparent that she is not there to hurt him. She tells him that the water is tainted with radiation from the city and that he shouldn't take a bath in it. When John hears this, he feels afraid and exits the water right away. But for him, it's too late. He starts to throw up, indicating that the radiation has already affected him. John, already weak, dashes to his car, gets an injection, and tries to give it to himself, and assists him because it is evident that he suffers due to trembling hands. John begs her to burn his corpse because he is now certain that he won't make it through the torture, and nevertheless, isn't willing to give up on him just yet. After bringing him to her backyard, she gives him a thorough washing to get rid of any last bits of pollution. After that, she takes him inside the house, but his condition doesn't get better over the next few days and continues to be committed to John's care by giving him additional medication. He whimpers in agony and has a high fever one night. He doesn't get any better despite her attempts to cool him down with cold water. He stays comatose and is left with no choice except to pray for a speedy recovery for him. At last, this succeeds, and John becomes conscious again, and gives him an album of pictures one evening when they are sitting on the porch outside. She tells of her brother, who never came back after leaving to get supplies. She also discusses the death of her father from radiation exposure. Her faithful dog is now the sole person by her side. John gives her a kind stare as he is moved by her story. Then he discloses that he was employed by a government facility as a research engineer. In reality, he was part of the design team that created the radiation-resistant suit that he was donning at their first encounter. John visits, and the following day, as she is working on her farm, and inquires about the abandoned tractor. She says that when they ran out of fuel, it stopped functioning. John recommends stopping at a local gas station in his conversation, and is first hesitant, noting that there isn't any electricity to pump the fuel. She prepares for the expedition, though, until engineer John indicates they can collect it manually, and then makes her way to the petrol station, where she manages to fill up her tractor. Excited, she leaps up and waves to John, who is seeing her through a rifle scope, and tells him how much she appreciates him when she eventually gets home. She admits that she hadn't thought about manually pumping the petrol previously. John acknowledges this and speculates that maybe her solitude has caused her to ignore these options. After that, he considers his own history and says that residing in the government bunker gave him the impression that everything in his life had stopped. He says he built his outfit and wagon-like vehicle so he could travel and feel free again, even if it meant putting his life in danger. With time, as John regains his vigor, he grows accustomed to Anne's straightforward, primitive lifestyle. She takes him to a radiation-free pond nearby one day. She enjoys the supper with him after landing a large fish. This is just what John was searching for when he left his bunker, so he considers himself fortunate to have met her. and says they should stock up on food because winter is coming and she almost went hungry last year. In order to capture and preserve fish from the pond, she wants to get the freezers operating, and says she used to have a generator, but it's currently broken. John tries to apply his engineering degree once more after learning this. He goes to the generator room and makes several unsuccessful attempts to fix it. He then shows in the waterfall while imparting a fresh concept. John proposes that they use the waterfall to produce their own electricity. They must construct a sizable wheel that will spin when it comes into touch with water in order to do this, and is thrilled with the concept, so they head back home to make further plans. John says that in order to make the wheel, a lot of wood will be required. There are no trees that would provide such timber. Therefore, they will have to destroy the neighboring church and use the planks. And, though, angrily rejects the notion. She notes that as a devoted Christian, the church gave her consolation and peace while she was alone herself. Her late father, who was a priest there at one point, really built it. John gives up on the plan out of consideration for her sentiments, and they decide to concentrate on finding alternative arrangements for the generator. John finds a closed grocery one day while and is farming, and he begins to drink. He gets more inebriated and hostile toward her when she finds him there, and manages to get him home, but she is extremely offended by his impolite behavior. John expresses regret for his unexpected behavior from the previous night the next morning, and readily forgives him, and even reassures him that she is not unhappy since she is willing to keep their relationship intact. She makes them a delicious dinner that evening to lift his spirits. She cracks open a bottle of wine and takes a sip. John doesn't understand her actions because he knows she doesn't drink. In any case, they have a great dinner and dance the night away. Afterwards, and shows him to her room where she starts to undress. They get almost intimate, but John pulls away at the last second. He claims that he needs more time and that it would alter their relationship. A few days later, and meets Caleb, a man, while she is strolling her dog in the hills. He seems really undernourished and dehydrated, and feels sorry for the man, even though he is a total stranger, and invites him to her farmhouse. Caleb's presence worries John, so he hastily draws his rifle, and, however, reassures him that the man is not dangerous and soothes him. Then Caleb says that although he and the others were living in a nearby mine, the radiation quickly got to them. His pals then became evil and began murdering one another. He had to escape for his life as a result, and he happened to come across this valley devoid of radiation. Subsequently, and confides in John and demands that they keep Caleb inside. Although John is hesitant, he is powerless because and is the one who has to make this decision. During their breakfast together that night, the two men relate terrifying tales of the post-apocalyptic world they came across prior to discovering the valley. While traveling north, John remembers coming across a young child who had contracted the radiation sickness. He begged to be taken out of his suffering since he was unable to endure the excruciating side effects. John shot the youngster out of compassion and left his body by the side of the road, and shows Caleb to his room after supper and asks him to get a good night's sleep. John tells her to exercise caution because they don't know much about the new guy, given how close they are. He has doubts about Caleb's past because he stated that working in the mines caused him to become unrevived, and, on the other hand, gives a defensive response and queries his lack of discussion about the radioactive youngster previously. John acknowledges that he wanted to tell her, but lacked the bravery. The boy turned out to be her brother, as he suddenly admits after gathering his courage. John was forced to put him down because of his terrible state, and starts crying when she hears this, but she also understands and forgives him. The two guys go hunting in the forest the following day, although there is undoubtedly some friction between them, and in Caleb both mention having similar religious views. John is rather jealous when he compliments her attitude and tenacity. They manage to hunt and successfully bring home a wild bird, nonetheless, in spite of their disagreements. They talk about the water wheel project once more later that evening. Citing the church wood's importance as a place of prayer, Caleb is against using it. Surprisingly, though, and decides she should go ahead and says they should. She underlines that since producing electricity is their only chance of surviving the winter, perhaps God wants them to do it. The group sets to work the following day breaking down the chapel. John starts to feel uneasy as and Caleb get closer over this period. He so gives in a call, and lets her know how he feels. In addition, he asserts that he respects her decisions and that she is free to live her life as she pleases, whether that be with him or another else, and exits the conversation without responding since she is torn by what he said. They make great strides toward their water wheel project the following day. They eat a candlelit meal by the pond to celebrate. In another entertaining game, Caleb tosses a bottle into the water, and the other two have to race to retrieve it. John gives up right away because it looks like he's a lousy swimmer, and, on the other hand, locates the bottle but manages to lose it. She has impressive skills, and Caleb offers to help her get the bottle. John looks on with jealous eyes as the two jump into the water. So, he declares that he is prepared to wed and as soon as she reappears. His remarks have absolutely surprised the latter, but she also seemed to be ecstatic. After that, they go to their room to continue their conversation, but John is so inebriated that he quickly drops off. When tries to wake him up because she is sorely missing him, he adamantly tells her to get away. She walks over to Caleb's room and stands in front of his doorstep, feeling let down. She is hesitant to knock because she is still torn between her love for both guys. However, Caleb drags her inside as he opens the door. After that, they begin dating and finally spend the night together. John is once more concerned when Anne and Caleb sit at the breakfast table the following morning. The two guys then make the decision to carry on working on the water wheel. John expresses gratitude to Caleb for unintentionally bringing him and in closer while they travel. John came to realize how much he loved her because of him. Caleb doesn't say anything since the ambiguous suggestion makes him uncomfortable. The two men finish the water wheel and place it atop the waterfall in spite of their disagreements. Caleb stumbles when climbing up since he is wearing a heavy radiation suit. To save him, John snatches the rope with speed. However, John feels Caleb's hatred as they meet eyes at this very time. He understands that if he were in the same situation, Caleb wouldn't be able to save him. Then all of a sudden, the scene turns black when John gets home by himself and admits that she was really intoxicated the night before and made a mistake. John says he understands her desperation and casually forgives her. Then he talks about how Caleb abruptly went to look for other settlements. But when Anne hears this, she gets suspicious and goes outside to investigate. When she doesn't find anyone, she thinks John could have planned something. She struggles for the next few days with her misgivings about John's behavior and feels depressed, and finds out one evening that John has linked the generator, which is now running on the water wheel, to the wiring. She is overjoyed when this turns on the house's electricity again. When she goes to the storage room the following day, she finds a piano that used to be in the church. After they made the decision to demolish the location, John found it again, and starts to play the piano and becomes absorbed in her compositions. John eventually joins her and gives her a guilty-looking look. He understands that her faith in him has been destroyed and that she has discovered the truth, that he killed Caleb. As the film ends, Anne is still playing the piano and letting all of her sadness and disappointment out. John, in the meantime, pays attention in silence and is aware of the depth of her feelings.